Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rejuvi 45. If you have read about Rejuvi and Rejuvi 45, you're here because you know this is a community that believes we need to modernize the way that we develop our leaders, because we believe that you can have compassionate human leaders at the same time as you have fierce business leaders. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching our full recordings, and thank you for watching our reels. We are definitely on a mission to build modern leadership capability throughout the globe. My name is Regina Hepp, and I'm with the Rejuvi Venture. And today I am joined by.
This is Scott Obbitz, and I'm a partner at Twin Ignition. It's a startup incubator in Northeast Minneapolis.
Hello, Scott. Thank you for being here today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. For those of you who are new to Scott Obbitz, I was new to Scott Obbitz in 2024, but we have had some absolutely fantastic conversations over the course of the past, I don't know, 9 months, and I feel like we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, kindred souls of some sort, huh?
I absolutely believe so. Scott, can you, for our audience today, maybe tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do at Twin Cities Ignition?
Yeah, so my background has always been around technology in some sorts. I did investment banking on the East Coast. I did some stops in some of the larger organizations, the Targets and Thomson Reuters in the Twin Cities area here. But I really realized my passion was around smaller organizations and startups. So probably about a decade ago or so, I really kind of changed my career and went into startups more in a strategy and product role, and really enjoyed that and was kind of on the inside of several locally here. And then I decided that I kind of wanted to just be helpful to the startups as opposed to be in the startups and the grind of the startups. And so I started advising startups probably about 6, 7, 8 years ago, just independently. And then I ran into my now two partners, Ben Rasmussen and Seth Peter at Twin Ignition. They were doing very similar things to me. So we decided to kind of get together, and we have complementary backgrounds, and create Twin Ignition in 2018, 2019, kind of informally and then more formally. And so with Ignition, what we have actually is kind of three components to what we do. One is we are angel investors. We do kind of pre-seed, seed round investments, mostly in technology businesses, preferably in B2B. That's kind of our sweet spot. That said, if we love a given founder or a value proposition, we'll make an investment. We've invested probably in over 20 companies now. Uh,
Mhm.
but then along with that, we do have a physical location in Northeast Minneapolis on Marshall Street. That's really a founder space for startups. One of the things that we identified is you had a lot of founders scattered in WeWorks and coffee shops and so forth. And we
Sure.
wanted to create a space that people were, when you're one, two, three founders together, we want to create a space that you could go find other people that are like-minded and experiencing the same things you are. And Seth actually had the building and it did an
Yeah,
incredible
it's a
job
fantastic
renovating.
facility. Yeah,
Oh, it's so amazing.
yeah,
Um, and it's got a great vibe too now.
yeah.
So if anyone's a founder and looking for a space,
Mhm.
please pick us up. We'd love to have you. And so we're able to provide that space for people to get together as well. And then for early stage startups as well, one of the things we'll do is advise. And just because we invest, we don't necessarily have to advise, but at any given time, two or three companies for a year or two, kind of when they're really getting started, pre Series A round, we'll do advising of those companies with our kind of, Seth has a technical background. I have more strategy and finance, and Ben's a little bit more around the operations and sales. So we're able to kind of bring a good complementary set of skills to the table, and it seems to be working well.
Yeah. I always appreciate it. when you include strategy as a piece of how you think about what you do um, as a leader and a contributor and someone who's trying to make a difference in the space, in addition to, for example, knowing what you're doing from a finance perspective. Because I think that one of the reasons why strategies, as you know, is a really big deal for me, and it's a really big deal for Rejuvi. And I think that one of the things that you and I have deeply connected on is that strategy is doable. It's teachable. Um, it is something that you can break apart to meaningful, repeatable sequence steps. And we can communicate these to all types of leaders in small businesses and in large businesses. I think that's one of the things that I have appreciated about you so much. And I remember the first time meeting you, and you talked about this love for business strategy that you had, because when you are able to talk to leaders about it, you help them shift from the we're crawling, we're walking, and we're and now we're running. And I've never forgotten that, Scott. And I think that you're an amazing strategic thinker, and you have an amazing capability to break this apart for leaders.
Well, I appreciate that. And I would say, kind of in reverse, that's why I'm so attracted to what you're doing at Rejuvi. I think it's great. I think when people talk about leadership, a lot of time you kind of automatically go to a leader of people, right? And
That's right.
pathetic leaders and how do you lead the organization and everything. And, looking at your diagrams early on and thinking about it, the fact that you're bringing in the strategic context, external context in relation to leadership, I think is a game changer. And that's why I really appreciate working with you and the team there
Yeah,
at
it's
Rejuvi.
fun. Well, I actually have some really fun questions for you, like the quick round. I'm going to save those for an end because I can start to feel us kind of getting on a little bit of our roll.
Okay.
So everybody watch till the very end because we're going to put Scott through a rapid round of questions. But so we're here today, and Scott, you know that we give these really fun 45 titles to our sessions as we're building this modern leadership community. And today our title is The Big Roar. And I'm gonna give you the
With my
statement.
lion up here.
Yeah, exactly. So, oh, I don't have my lion is over there on that wall.
Yeah.
My giraffe is here, but well, yours are real. This is from a safari that you took. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah. I'm the
You and your
photographer of
family.
those. Yeah. Crazy. South African safari.
Yeah,
Oh,
and your whole family, your whole
whole
family.
family. Yeah. It was
Yeah,
an amazing
it's
experience.
fantastic. Um, So the big roar and Scott has a perfect backdrop for this today, but I'm going to put the statement in front of you. It's one that we use at Rejuvi a lot, and I kind of want your reaction to it. It's kind of in two parts. Okay, this is it. Great leadership brings prowess to analytics, and analytics brings prowess to great leadership.
Yeah. I love the
What's your reaction to this?
Yeah, I love that. And the intersection of those two, there's a little bit of a virtuous cycle that kind of created there too, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. And so the leadership to analytics, I think, is a really important one in my experience, whether it's been in large organizations or small organizations. I think there's oftentimes a misconception that analytics and in particular artificial intelligence these days, you kind of throw a problem at it and we'll solve it, right? And I
Hmm.
think it kind of neglects the need to, you still have to be hypothesis driven. You still have to understand the context of the organization that you're working within.
Hmm.
There is certain constraints still, whether it be capital or competitive or, any of those strategic constraints that we've talked about.
Hmm.
And you need to kind of utilize the analytics, but in a very strategic and very pointed
Hmm.
way. Rarely do you get lucky, throw some data into into the black box, and it comes out with the answer that you need, and it's perfect, right? So I think
Hmm.
it's really important for leaders that are kind of contextualizing everything in the environment of a given organization to be able to get the most out of analytics.
Mhm.
And I think,
Mhm.
that being said, on the other side, if you're a leader that is not utilizing analytics to their best ability, you're falling behind to some extent,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Especially in this day and age,
Mhm.
I guide startups, and startups are now becoming much more capital efficient when AI can make a developer 10x more effective. That should be scary for leaders of mid-size and other small organizations and large organizations. And the way that you kind of have to use that analytics to get a little bit more of a force multiplier to your own business, right? And
Mhm.
your ability to lead. And so instead of using it as thinking that it's replacing anything, it's actually, supplementing and empowering more. And especially, and again, this is where I love where you're going with Rejuvi is that it's not just about development and it's not about the sales channels, right? You can use analytics from a leadership perspective, very specifically as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And one of the first things I want to react to is this phrase that you use called force multiplier. And you're speaking not only about analytics, but you're also, I think, speaking about emerging technologies. I think these things kind of go hand. You have advanced analytics and you have
Yep.
emerging technologies, and I very much agree that you're right. They can be a force multiplier. But if you take a look at what has happened in terms of the investments that organizations have made in advanced analytics and in emerging technologies like AI, it goes back to some of the phrases. I think you might be around for about as long as me, but you go back to some of the phrases that we learned early in our careers called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Yes.
And so yes, these things can be force multipliers for us. But if you are chasing the shining penny, right, or just interested in starting to unpack, AI or what have you, and it's not deeply connected to your leadership process, you're going to create swirl inside of your organization, right? And that's why we say great leadership brings prowess to analytics, or great leadership brings prowess to analytics and technology, because
Correct.
you have to make great decisions about what you choose to invest in and the problems that it's solving and the opportunities that it's pouncing in order to actually have it serve you in a force multiplier kind of way. Do you know what I mean, Scott? That's like the first half of this equation. If you don't have a strong leadership process, including a way to think about your strategic intent, you're never going to get to this force multiplier kind of like that's
Yeah.
created because of analytics and technology.
Yeah, and the way that I've found that to manifest itself in organizations, when you hear the term analysis paralysis, right? So if
Yes.
you don't have that direction and you're just hoping that the analysis is going to show you the way, you'll end up analyzing and spinning and so forth. And again, this is where leaders need to kind of short circuit that and
Yeah.
make sure that it's targeted where these great tools are very powerful, but right with becomes with great responsibility. So yeah,
Hmm.
you can't just assume that it's going to take care of itself. And that's where you get into that swirl if you don't have a leader that has the clear vision of where it needs to go
Hmm.
and the hypothesis driven approach.
Hmm. Yeah, and before I get to this other half of because there is a lot of good feedback that you didn't made in your opening comments and your reaction to this phrase, great leadership brings prowess to analytics and technology, and analytics and technology bring prowess to great leadership. You talked about this as a feedback loop. But before we get to the feedback loop, I want to do one more thing about this great leadership brings prowess to analytics, because it will be, this garbage in, garbage out analysis paralysis. So there's that. But I want to talk just a little bit about great leadership, and some of the new models that exist to help leaders. I think what I would say is find their sea legs or become grounded in the ways and the work of a leader. And one of my philosophies about great leadership is I would make two comments as I look at how organizations have grown our leaders in the past. And one is that as we try to grow our leaders, we've subjected them to business planning cycles that are driven by accounting cycles.
Yes, yes. As we've
You
talked
know,
about, yes.
right? And so the strategic planning units, or in many cases, the finance units at any given time in our organizations, if you're on a calendar year in August, kind of September, they're reaching out and they're saying, hey, we want you to put a forecast together for where you're going to be at the end of the year. And then number two, here are the priorities for the following year. And from that, we'd like you to determine what your objectives and strategies are and put some numbers to that so that we can build your budget for the following year. You jump from this kind of big picture, the shell of a big picture, to this kind of short-term planning view. And that's all driven by our accounting cycle. So I think in terms of how our organizations have groomed our leaders, one truth that I can speak is we've subjected them to accounting cycles that ask them to think about how to put a business plan together. And the other thing that I think is a little incomplete and kooky in terms of how we've grown our leaders is that in many cases, our leadership development curriculums, like that's the leadership process that we use, but the
Mhm.
leadership development curriculums that we put together are so often make the assumption that leadership is only about leading people, which is
Right.
not the reality. And that's come up in your conversation. Do you know what I mean? So when we talk about great leadership, bringing prowess to analytics and technology, it's not only recognizing that if you don't have that great leadership process, you're going to be stuck in analysis paralysis, and analytics and technology are never going to become the force multiplier that you want it to be. But don't think that great leadership can be housed on thinking of the past, right? Because it's got to fix those two problems that I just talked about in order for you to get to this. I love this word that you use, amplified results from your analytics and technology.
Yeah, I think, as you talked, I think it was interesting as we've talked about in the past about this, how everything in an organization gets lined up, whether it's financials and HR and strategy, you get these annual processes, right? And it drives the
That's
organization.
right.
You spend a certain amount of time and you feel like you finish one and then you start thinking about the other, right? Like, and there's just kind of this loop. And a lot of it, to your point, is kind of repackaged from last year. And it's almost cost plus analysis. It's not, it becomes less and less dynamic as an
Hmm.
organization grows too.
Hmm.
It's interesting as you were saying that I had this kind of analogy of like in development circles of the old world of waterfall versus agile, right? Like it
Hmm.
feels like we're still in the waterfall where, and some organizations, that they still do that and that's fine. But just, there's got to be some ways to create more of an agile process as well.
Hmm.
I think that's, to the point about the word amplified, I think I go back to the amount of information, whether it be advanced analytics or AI, that's available at our fingertips in very short order is amazing. And therefore, the speed that we're operating in is that much more fast, right? Like our decisions can be that much more quick, can have that much more impact. And so everything is amplified as a result. And then maybe I'll just give an example. And I think that I've provided in the past. So like one of my favorite podcasts is the All In podcast. Bunch of billionaires sitting around and talking, but they're really
They're
fascinating.
they're such great guys, and
It
it's such a fantastic podcast.
it is so fun. It's kind of must listen for me every week. But recently, and just kind of on and off, they were doing their prediction segments for the year, and one of the gentlemen said, he said the and what's your crazy prediction? And he said kind of offhand, that one of the big banks could fail this year. And, again, it was a little bit tongue in cheek and everything. But as he said that, one of the other hosts goes and types into Google's Gemini Deep Research,
Which is
which,
their fave, right?
yeah, right.
Which is their fave tool.
Which is,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's $20 a month, so it's super, cheap as well. It's at anyone's fingertips. And he plugs in, if a big bank were to fail, which one would fail in the US? And 7 minutes later, he got a report that he said he could have taken from McKinsey, right? And it showed how they defined what a big bank is. It talked about what analysis they did from publicly available sources of their balance sheet, of their account, right? Like all this stepwise, and then ranked, and I won't go into the banks themselves, but kind of went through a ranking and some qualification of what banks were the most susceptible potentially. And again, it was tongue in cheek, but what it highlighted to me is if you can go get that report in 7 minutes, which probably would have taken an analyst a week to do historically, the pace that you can work
In
as a
fact, it would have taken an analyst, I think that would be a lowball estimate, a week to do it. And it would have taken a consulting organization. It would have cost you at least six digits,
right.
right?
Yes,
You come
exactly.
back to your organization and now you can get that in 7 minutes,
Yeah.
through a $20 a month, really healthy, service.
It's a starting point. And at a minimum, it's a good starting point, right? And you can go further and deeper on it. But it just kind of brought this sense of, again, everything's amplified in some way. That is a very powerful tool with a very powerful input in a very short period of time. You used to start a project and I mean, to your point, you'd bring in a consulting firm and they would do a 4 to 6 week project and, you'd kind of wait for the results. And so you had time to think about it.
Yeah.
You really are losing ground now if you're not using these tools to help you make decisions and then actually
Mhm.
make those decisions. And so
Mhm.
it really kind of amplifies the impact to the organization. And then as a leader, how do you utilize that and make sure that everybody's kind of on board with that? Because you used to have time to kind of socialize the results and everything. Everything about that, it could be very game changing for any organization.
Right. And in order for it to be changing, you have to be able to take this analysis, right? And the leader kind of has to plug it into a strong leadership process. I had an experience this week. We are working with a very large US based client. And so they are just getting kicked off with Rejuvi, and so we're doing some role modeling of what it can look like when leaders get modern leadership feedback and how you coach them either individually or through cohort-based coaching processes to become better, at modern leadership and how that really gets unpacked in a sequential kind of way. Anyway, so this senior leader said, he goes, Reg, so I've been given feedback that I'm not a transformational leader.
Hmm.
And he goes, I've never really known what that means until I'm learning how to think about the sequence steps that take an organization from strategic intent through business unit intelligence, through midterm objective and strategy targeting to short-term implementation. And he said, I didn't get it. So he said, the organization is running a process where they're going from big picture to little picture because that's how our accounting cycles drive it. And
Right.
they're giving me feedback that I'm not transformational. And now what I'm hearing is that that's probably fair feedback because you can't go from big term, long term to short term. You've got to do a lot of midterm work as a leader, right? And that's why I'm being given feedback, fair or not, it's good feedback, right? If that's our culture, makes us be these kind of non-transformational leaders where we're trying to figure out how to do these gigantic hops from the long term to the short term. But he said, what I'm hearing in these new models is there's other work that I know that I need to lead in order to make the direction more solid and the decisions more accurate, right?
Yeah.
So I love that feedback from him around I've been given this feedback, but I didn't know what the heck it meant until I looked at these modern models of how leadership really now is unfolding now that the future of work has arrived. And so I love what you're talking about in terms of the All In podcast, right? Because in order to get the amplified results from something like Gemini, where we can ask it, competitive landscape sorts of questions, you can get that in 7 minutes now. But
Yeah.
that stuff is still just information unless our leaders have a strong process and that they feel confident in it in order to direction and decision differently on behalf of the job that they have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think what I kind of went to as you talk about kind of the long term to the midterm to the short term. I mean, I guess, and a lot of people probably get stuck in this, right? You get these long term goals and you kind of instantly go start doing the tasks that you need to do, right?
That's
And
right.
if, and maybe naively, hopefully, what the pace and kind of the amount of information you have provides actually space in the middle to do the midterm, right? And so you maybe create, especially for middle management, and so if they're tasked with something, now
Mhm.
instead of having to wait for lots of information to be able to process, to translate from the long to the short, I can at least go get the starting points and do some of that middle level
That's
work
right.
and not have to launch right into the tasks that I know. And those are the comfort zone, right? You kind of go to your point of comfort. And if you have tasks that are out there, you're going to go do those, right? Whereas that meaty stuff, and I guess, you think about that, that meaty stuff was intimidating potentially before. It would take weeks, right? It would take a team. Well, now I can just kind of plug it in and 7 minutes later and see what it tells me, right? Like I can maybe process and iterate a little bit even on my own as a leader as I'm trying to translate those goals and objectives on the long term into those short term tasks.
Mhm. Yeah. I know we didn't talk about this, but and I'm looking at the time, I think I have time to talk about it. Since we were planning for this, I came across this article called, and it was in the AI and machine learning component of Harvard Business Review. It was from fourth quarter of last year. And it's got this kind of little picture associated with it. And the title of the article is AI Can Mostly Outperform CEOs. And so I was kind of like, what? So I kind of looked at this and they set up a situation. They set up this kind of, this experiment where they took about 350 leaders and they had these 350 leaders in a digital twin of the US automotive industry competing against um, GPT-4o.
Okay.
And what they found was two things that GPT-4's performance was remarkable as a CEO, and it outperformed 350 leaders in making rapid decisions. But ChatGPT 4.0 was fired more quickly by the board in these scenarios every time when it came to deep analysis with disruption, change direction, and black swan events in a market.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, my first reaction to this was, well, this is a stupid headline,
Right.
right? Because AI can mostly outperform human CEOs. No, that's an inaccurate statement unless you think CEO's role is only about making tactical decisions,
Right.
right? So my
Exactly.
first reaction to this was that's a really, really bad title to this. And number two, I think the story of this article represents exactly what we're talking about, which is if you want the amplified results of advanced analytics and emerging technology, you've got to ground your leaders in a really good understanding of the sequential modern leadership process so that when they have market disruption, when their competitive landscape shifts, when there are these black swan events, they can take the analysis that can come to them 20 times faster than it used to, right? And they can now set direction that informs better decisions on behalf of their organization, right? That's exactly what you and I are saying.
Right. And I think the other piece again is if you look at the Rejuvi model, is it's what that's assuming is again the business context, not the people context. What AI engine is going to hold a town hall for the company, right, and motivate people around a
Mhm,
goal, right? Like,
mhm,
so
mhm,
there's the people component, there's the business component, and there is an art to leadership that is grounded in your experiences, and so having domain expertise and having experiences of seeing things before. Yeah, AI and advanced analytics can see the numbers and the activity behind it, but they don't necessarily understand the nuance behind it, how
mhm,
an organization is going to react, how competitors may react, right? Like it's a good decisioning tool to your point, uh,
mhm.
but it's not a leadership tool, right? It's not a leader unto
That's
it.
it. That's it. That's exactly right. And so now that you're really talking about people, what I want to do in the last kind of 10 minutes or so that we have is kind of shift to the other half of the statement because we've kind of unpacked the great leadership brings prowess to analytics and technology. Um, and if you have this grounded model, you then can get the amplified results, right? So there's that. But there's this other half of the equation of our point of view, which is analytics and technology brings prowess to kind of great leadership. And I want to read this out for the audience because this is something that you said, which really struck me. I always feel like whenever we meet, you give me a handful of really good nuggets to think about, kind of go into my tent about, until of our next session. But I love that you said this. You said. Um, in relationship to analytics and technology, bringing prowess to great leadership. That is good leadership can never be replaced. AI is never going to replace a leader, and it's going to impact how we think about the role of a leader today, given that the step change in capability. Scott, that was so meaningful to me, but why did you respond that way?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when I think about it, the core is, I think, as with a lot of things in life, you kind of diminish the amount of art and the difficulty of a given situation, and you want to break it down. And maybe this comes from my consulting background. Like you spend days on a slide, and if it's really easy to understand and people get it right away, you've won, right? Like, and but they made and they're like, oh yeah, that's super easy, and no, it actually wasn't, right? Like, and so it's those things actually to your point about, I think, longitudinal analysis that has to kind of contextualize a lot of different things and communicate that in a way that people can understand. And I think the important part about that is back to the part about replacing a CEO. The great CEOs, in my opinion, they can deliver the same message to multiple different groups, but they'll do it in a different way.
Mhm.
And so
Based on kind of what each of these groups can receive, like how are they going to take it in? What's going to give them their sea legs about kind of what's really happening?
exactly. And I just have a hard time believing, and again, I may be naive and the singularity is upon us, but I have a hard time believing that you're ever going to be able to replace the human connection part of it. And again, it comes to even tactical things that when a CEO's or any leader is speaking to the senior leadership, they're going to use a different language, different tone, different body language, even at times, versus when they're speaking to the quote unquote line employees, you're going to take that same information and deliver it differently, even,
Mhm.
right? And so I have a hard time believing that the art of leadership will ever be replaced by analytics or AI. Again, I think analytics and AI will help supplement them and make them better
Mhm.
leaders for sure. But I just don't think you can replace the human interaction that's required. And again,
I I could I couldn't agree more. And what I often say is that analytics and technology in relation to this phrase, analytics and technology bring prowess to great leadership. What we think analytics and technology can do is change the conversation.
right.
Right? That's what it can do. And just like the great leader who now understands how to change the conversation, because as I'm working with this group, right, and what's important to them, right, this is how, I need to communicate in order to create this really good sense of understanding. But we actually believe at Rejuvi the conversation about what we understand about our leadership capability has never been connected to the outcomes that we really care about. And we think that now, because of emerging tech and advanced analytics, we now have that capability. And so if we are able to use, I'm gonna hold up a piece of my card deck here, right? This very simple model, which took us years to build, right? And to complete the research behind. It's very elegant and simple in its front face, but very complex behind the scenes. But the changed conversation that now can happen about great leadership because of analytics and technology is they can know in this more grounded, simple, elegant model, they can understand their rate of change. They can understand if, for example, we grow the South Hemisphere by 1%, just improve that leadership capability by 1%. What is it doing to our people outcomes like engagement? What is it doing to our operational outcomes, like error ratios? What is it doing to our value-based outcomes like net new clients? That's the changed conversation that we think now can be had. It's a different kitchen table conversation. People actually want to come to supper now. People actually can have a very different conversation about leadership, all because the game has been completely changed in terms of how analytics and technology can inform great leadership. Your whole kitchen table now conversation can change, right? That is
Love that.
so awesome.
I love that.
Right? That is so
Yeah.
that is so awesome.
Yeah. It's very powerful.
Yes. So we just have a couple minutes left. And Scott, I can't thank you enough for, well, first of all, I know you're starting to meet, a number of folks from the Rejuvi team. We just want to thank you so much for being a leader in the startup space, but more importantly, I think being a great role model and a great contributor to leadership and what it actually means in a modernized way. Because we need to bring that capability to all leaders in small companies, mid-sized companies, and in large companies. And we're just so happy that our paths have not only crossed but become aligned. And we see you as a great contributor to this. So thank you for that. And again, thank you, I think, for adding to what our point of view around great leadership brings prowess to advanced analytics and emerging technologies. And it's a loop because the other half of it is around advanced analytics and emerging technologies bringing prowess to great leadership. Thank you for all of your thought leadership about this.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, I'm super impressed with what you're doing. So I'm just honored to be part of the journey with you.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to move from being honored to fun. And we've got, for those people now who are getting to know Scott from Twin Ignition, I think I call it Twin Cities Ignition, but it's actually Twin Ignition. I'm not
20.
Twin Cities Ignition, right? So
Yes.
Twin Ignition, I stand corrected. So for those of you who are now getting to know how fantastic Scott is from Twin Ignition, now we're going to just put him in just a quick round. So when you get to meet him, you'll know a little bit more about him personally. Okay, three closed questions, one open-ended question. First, closed question, dogs or cats?
Oh boy. I was cats. I'm now dogs.
Okay, there's a story. Okay, everybody call Scott, unpack that. Number two, mountains or beaches?
Beaches,
Okay, bumper cars or roller coaster?
bumper cars.
I know, right?
I love bumper cars, actually.
I love bumper cars, but I also find them so much more controllable than roller coaster, which tells you a little bit
I
about
don't like lack of control, right?
right? I know, which tells you a little bit about my personality. Okay,
Yeah.
and then the open-ended question, what's the best way to eat ice cream?
Oh my gosh. In a waffle cone.
Okay, sounds fantastic. All right. Thank you, Scott, for being here today. And thank you everyone for checking in, for watching our recordings, and for watching our reels that we post on all of our social media accounts. This will be it for our January sessions. We will be back in February, the first Thursday of February. We will be doing a session called Swirly Twirly Content Train. So we will love to see you then. Until then, thank you for being a part of the Rejuvi 5 Modern Leadership community, and keep going, because building modern leadership capability inside our organizations is more doable than ever before. So keep going. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.